Hi guys, loads of you have been asking for a Paladin Hotkeys guide, similar to the one I made for EK some years ago. And I finally caved and I prepared something for you. So I hope you find this useful. In this video we'll cover the gaming mouse that I use, because obviously you need to know what gaming mouse I use and how I have the layout of the hotkeys on the MMO gaming mouse. I'll talk a little bit about using WASD versus arrow keys. I will talk a little bit about separation of concerns. If you've watched my EK video, it's the same idea. And then I will share with you my actual hotkeys. So first of all, I use the Corsair Scimitar RGB Elite MMO mouse. I can recommend it. Works very, very well for me. It's just one of the most popular MMO gaming mice. If you want to, you can check out my Amazon affiliate link. I'll post in the description down below. If you purchase through that link, I get a little cut, like 50 Tibia coins equivalent or something. Not a big deal. If you can find it somewhere else for cheaper, do that, no problem. But if Amazon is cheap for you, then that would help me out as well. So yeah, definitely can recommend it. Works very, very well for MMOs. Mine tends to break every couple of years or so, and I have to replace it. But, you know, it gets a ton of usage from me, so I guess I can't complain too much. Has a decent piece of software where you can remap all the keys and stuff. I don't know, I can definitely recommend it. I think it's a pretty good one. That's the one I've been using for many, many years now. Now with regards to WASD versus arrow keys, I use WASD setup. Basically, I move with WASD instead of the arrow keys. So it's basically the sort of newer setup that Tipsoft has introduced, you know, probably a solid decade or so ago now. Some old school players still use move arrow keys and like do the piano with the hotkeys and stuff. I would not recommend that. It's overall quite inefficient, you know, unless you are like super used to it and you've been doing it for 20 years. I recommend against it. And my hotkeys will be prepared for the WASD setup, and that is what I recommend you do as well. Now we'll talk a little bit about separation of concerns, and I think this is the driving principle of the way I design my hotkeys on all of my characters. I want to separate offensive actions and the way I deal damage from basically everything else that I do as part of my rotation, movement, etc. This allows you to multitask a lot better, and it allows you not to freeze up in difficult situations. You know, if you're using one hand to heal, deal all the damage, etc., it's really tricky to have press 5 different hotkeys every second with like one hand. And this, if you separate it like this, it allows you to, one hand is dealing damage and the other one takes care of the healing. So you're kind of not mixing up the things, you're not messing up the potions. I found this is the best way to set up your hotkeys. When I made my video for the EK, a lot of people have agreed with it once they understood how it works. So that is the driving design of how I prepare my hotkeys, and I highly do recommend you do it like this as well. Yeah, this allows you to multitask much more effectively. You can sort of separate your brain to focus on two different things with two different hands, and this is for common actions only, right? So this is why by this I mean like just the rotation stuff that you use like every sort of second. This doesn't mean that you can only have offensive stuff on like the one hand and everything else on the other. You will see in my hotkey setup that I do have some certain things that I use also with the hand, which I do the rotation with. So I'll have a rotation where I do a Divine Caldera, I'll do the rune, but I'll also have like rings that I put on there, for example. But it's stuff that I don't use every second, right? You do want to have the stuff that you use every second as part of your damage dealing to be on one hand. Moving on, there is a sort of a caveat to it. Paladin bossing is very easy and simple, right? You're just standing there in the back, usually just casting Utito, throwing Exori Grand Con, throwing a sudden death rune. So I do actually break this recommendation here for bossing because of how easy it is. I have all my hotkeys for bossing on my mouse. Which means I can just sort of stand back and just use my mouse, and I can just really relax. I don't even really need to move, put anything on the keyboard. This is just to be able to chill on the bosses. You don't have to have it like that at all. If you want to keep your separation of concerns for bossing as well, of course you can do that. And final point is, this is not compulsory. Obviously, if you can multitask effectively, you can stick to whatever setup you have. But I have always found that this separation of damage versus everything else on another hand works very well. So let's take a look at the actual hotkeys. And obviously, this is not gospel. You don't have to set it up just like this. It's just to give you an idea of what I have. This will vary from player to player. Depending on the layout of your keyboard, you may want to switch it around a little bit, but this is just an idea to illustrate how you should be thinking about hotkeys. So, first of all, I have my 4 hotkeys that I consider to be like core rotation for a Paladin that you will probably always want, and that is using the grenade from the wheel, using Exevo Massan or Divine Caldera, and using the carpet from the wheel, and obviously whichever rune you use. You also can have an extra hotkey for a rune for places where you use 2 runes at a spawn. For example, stuff like Warzone 5, you kind of want to have both Great Fireballs and Avalanches there, so you can consider having 2 different hotkeys for 2 different runes. Or, you know, this is just my setup, and this is what I consider the offensive stuff. This is the stuff that you really want to, all of these hotkeys have to have mapped on one hand. If you are high enough level to also be using Utito as part of your rotation, you can also consider adding your Utito somewhere here. I don't often use Utito as part of my sort of regular hunting because I'm a little bit too low level and it would probably get me killed, but you could consider sticking that on another hotkey nearby, some of these as well. Currently, I have it on my mouse just because I don't use it all that often. So this sums up the offensive stuff that you want to have on one hand. And just as an example of what else I have with my left hand, basically stuff that is on the keyboard, right? I have my Alicorn ring, Plasma Collar, Prismatic ring, SSAs and Might rings. I don't often use those. I don't often find myself in a situation where I need those. So I have them on a 7-8, which actually isn't very comfortable. If I was hunting a lot of like Soul War spawns and stuff and I was using SSAs and Might rings more regularly, I would probably rethink this and try and put it somewhere more comfortable. Maybe I would put it on the mouse. I'm not sure. I don't use those very often. I do have those hotkeys, but I don't use them very much. I also have like Energy Ring, Magic Wall, and like food, right? Mana and HP food on the M and H, kind of easy to remember for me. And I have a Bullseye Potion on P for potion, and I also have Familiar on 0. So basically, as you can see, all of those things are not really things that you're using as part of your rotation, right? Those are kind of things you use as needed, when needed. You know, something like Bullseye Potion, right? Use 6 times an hour. Energy Ring, depending on the hunt, you know, you might swap in and out every few boxes or something like that. Basically, non-core stuff that you use in every rotation, you can kind of stick somewhere else on the keyboard, however it's comfortable for you. And moving on, here is my mouse. So I have currently 14 hotkeys on my mouse from F1 to F14. I've mapped them, and this is how I've got my main setup. So the 4 hotkeys that I sort of use regularly, well, combat. Okay, so let's say I have 3 combat hotkeys that I use, and these are basically when I hunt, right? I will be using like those 4 hotkeys there and those 3 hotkeys here. Those are the 7 hotkeys that I really use as part of like combat, right? I use the grenade, except for my sand, carpet, and rune for fighting, and I use the potions, ultimate spirit on F1, and the GMP or GSP depending on the spawn on F3. And between those, I have Exura Grand San on F2. So I'm always spamming Exura Grand San, and then depending on whether I need extra healing, I go to the left for ultimate spirit to F1, or I just maintain my F3 on the mana potion. This is the core. This is basically like 95% of my hotkey usage, those 7 hotkeys. And moving on from that, I just have various other stuff that are kind of different abilities, spells that I use on my mouse. So for bossing, I have Exori Grand Con here on F4. My loot hotkey I've put on F5. So this is basically loot around. So I'm just, you know, running around. I'm dealing my damage with my left hand, and I'm just spamming F5 on my mouse to loot. For example, I do think you probably want your loot hotkey away from the offensive side, because, you know, the moment you kill everything, you want to be able to loot immediately, and you won't be able to do that if you have them all on the same hand. You know, I have my haste here, the tempo sand with shift. Obviously don't want to use that during combat. So Exoricon, we've got the offensive Utito here. Like I mentioned, if you're using this a lot, you would probably want to move this one somewhere else to the left as part of your offensive rotation. Like I mentioned already, I don't use that very much, so it's okay for me to be on the mouse. Then I have a regular Exura on F9. This is just to break paralyze when I'm on full health, just running through a full spawn. And I also have a secondary Exevo Massan hotkey on my mouse, and this is again for bossing only, like I already mentioned. If I have Exevo Massan on the boss, I don't need to be attacking with my left hand at all, right? I've got my Exevo Massan here, I've got my SD on F12, I've got my Grand Con on F4. I can basically just I can just kill bosses with my mouse. I don't need to worry about my keyboard, which is kind of comfortable. I also have a multi-tool on the mouse, and I also have Exeta and Press for ranged monsters, and also a bomb hotkey Most commonly, I'll use the energy bomb for Droom when I'm killing Droom, and that's about it. And this sums up all my hotkeys. Obviously, there are some other hotkeys that you need, stuff like Exsaniterra, Levitate, stuff like this, like non-combat stuff whatsoever. You will need to map it somewhere. I think I'll talk about this a little bit here. Yeah, so you have some utility, like Exanipox, like Antidote. You want to have a hotkey for Diamond Arrow Refill to go straight to your quiver. Dwarven Ring, Brown Mushroom, maybe if you eat food you'll want to like Rust Remover, but those honestly don't matter where you put them, right? Those are non-combat, you don't really use them very much, so stick them wherever the hell you want, wherever you still have space. I personally map those, most of those, I map those with Control and then various F1 to F12, right? So I have all those F1 to F14. I'll just map some of those hotkeys with Control and put like some random utility stuff on there. You don't want to be putting them like so close to all the other hotkeys that you accidentally cast them, right? You don't want to be accidentally putting on Dwarven Ring or whatever when you're hunting. So I just have Control. I just have Control reserved basically for these kind of utility hotkeys that I don't want to be using accidentally during team hunt. And yeah, this is it. These are my hotkeys. Like I mentioned already, this is not gospel. I haven't like sat down. I haven't made a PhD on how to optimize your hotkeys for a paladin, but this works for me. Maybe this will work for you. So if you found this interesting, you could check it out and make sure that if something's not comfortable for you, you can switch those around. And yeah, that's what I have for you today, guys. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to answer. And I hope this has been useful for some of you. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing. Helps out the channel a lot. Thank you very much. Bye bye.